We see that Ben and Rook were flying out in a spacecraft, and they'd been headed towards the Planetarian Karsakon prison, with them saying that everything would be automated, with the prisoner having no one to manipulate. No way in, no way out. Only one prisoner there and no one allowed in the sector. A familiar voice asks if they are meant to be flattered by all of this, and Ben walks to the back looking through a blast shielding glass, seeing Vilgax in energy stasis bands, saying that he doesn't like it any more than he does, and they both know it's a waste of time because he'd find a way. But the orders were from the High Magistrata. Rook says that he is activating the docking sequence, and Max tells them that once they're crossed over into the blackout field, all communications will be blocked and they will have no communications ability. If they get into any sort of trouble, then they will be on their own from that point onwards, until they can find a way out. Their ship was shot in the main thrusters, causing them to almost crash, but they'd managed to make it to the prison, landing without fully crashing the ship in the process. Rook tells Ben that the ship's controls were damaged in the landing, but he says that that's not a priority right now as he makes sure everyone is in one piece. Vilgax for a moment thinks himself free before getting shock manacles placed onto his wrists. Putting on his helmet to his armor, he then tells them all that they need to get inside immediately. They'd better grab some breathing tanks or hope they can hold their breaths long enough. Ben does not attack Vilgax as the fans on the ceiling push them onto the ground, because he doesn't just make stupid assumptions. He does say they need to keep going as they exit the chamber and continue on their way to take Vilgax to his cell that they were meant to be bringing him to, so they could focus on fixing the ship and leaving once they were done. Another chamber opens up as we see Atea walk out with 6677 and 88 before she'd noticed Ben was there, and she'd greeted them happy to see him, asking how he was doing, to which he'd answered that it was the same old really, though he did get engaged, and she seemed surprised to hear that. 77 says something and Atea yells at them that they are trying to have a conversation, before turning back to Ben asking how it went. He told her that he asked Gwen during their anniversary of their first date and she'd said yes, with Atea congratulating them for that, then asking when the wedding is, but Ben says that they haven't picked a date as they wanted it to be after Gwen's done with her college studies. The incursion princess then nodded hearing that, and says to save her an invitation, to which Ben says he'll see what Gwen has to say about that. He just wants her to be happy on the big day. Nodding, Atea then says back to business as she calls out for the Soterogian siblings to attack and to bring her the head of Vilgax. Ben tells Rook to tap into the systems to try to find anything useful, and his Ravonagander partner nods in response to that as he starts doing just that as he goes to fight the others, telling Vilgax to stay put with Rook, or they'd have a repeat of the Champion's Challenge while holding his plasma blade to his throat, just at the scar point he'd had there. The Warlord nodded, staying put where they were, knowing that Ben was not bluffing, as when he needed to, he could be quite ruthless in battle. Watching as they took their plumber staff and began fighting using both the blade and the staff this time, because of their numbers, cutting off 77's blaster arm, as they were arguing with him in a language Rook still didn't understand, but was finally getting at least a couple of words. 88 yells at him, and Ben tells her that it wasn't his fault. He told her it was unstable and she tried to use it anyway. That's completely on her, not him, while still fighting the Soterogians. As Rook calls out to Ben, saying that he has found something useful finally, and Ben nodded, taking down the siblings with explosives from his staff, as Atea had been struck by 66's body as it was flying backwards. They take off while the getting was good, and Rook explains that there was a final escape pod left available for use aboard the prison, and an auxiliary communications room just a bit below it, as they continue running to keep Vilgax away from Atea and the others, as Ben sighed, saying that he told Maggie this would be a bad idea. Ben tells Rook to take the other plumbers to the comm room, and he'll try to keep Vilgax alive. Nodding, the other plumbers then broke off to go to try to get to the controls, leaving Ben with Vilgax as the two of them continue on, with our hero deactivating the cuffs off on the tyrant as they rub their wrists, questioning why he'd simply do so. Answering, he says that both of them already know why. The incursions won't simply stop at Vilgax's planet. Once they are done there, they'll just keep going. And after taking down his world, there will be less people willing to fight against them, because once you conquer the Conqueror's world, who's crazy enough to try to stop you then? Vilgax then says that Ben has a better understanding understanding of how the universe works than most other species he's met, and our hero responds that he should given how much time he's spent exploring it over the past decade. The tyrant then asks what exactly he plans to do, and Ben responds that he plans to do his job. Atea and 88 appear to fight them, but Vilgax throws a grate at the two of them as he and Ben both jump down the shaft and use it to escape and head off to plan their next move, barely avoiding 77 and 66 in the process as they'd slip further into the shadows quietly to keep out of sight. The two of them got to the hangar where the final escape pod was, and they hear someone say that they were close but failed, as Atea and the Soterogian siblings come out with their blasters all pointed at the two of them as she says that the other plumbers were taken care of, and they can't call for backup, although another voice tells them that looks can be deceiving, as Rook appears alongside the other plumbers with their blasters all drawn and pointed at them. The princess holds up a device called a Tekadon Dissipator, which she points at the group, and pushes the button on it with Vilgax moving into the way of the blast, surprising everyone since he'd kept it from hitting Ben in the process. Ben then stands up and hits the watch, changing into depth charge. He then takes a deep breath and focuses the water in the tank on his back into his hand, and now having it ready to fight. The villains start to laugh. Well, those except for Vilgax were laughing, as Ben then threw it into the middle of them and the orb exploded apart as the force of it was able to knock them all back hard enough that they left indents into the metal of the area around them, where they hit, and Atea calls for a retreat and they all run off. Turning to Rook, Ben tells him to get the communications back up and running, and they nod, leading the other plumbers off to go try to take care of that, so they could contact Max and let him know what has happened. Once they were gone, Ben asked why Vilgax actually tried to save him, and the tyrant says that he'd found the universe is a lot more entertaining with him in it than without, and if anyone was going to destroy Ben, it would be him. Satisfied with that answer, Ben tells Vilgax to take the pod before he changed his mind and get back to his people and his family. The tyrant nodded and then slammed Ben into a wall to make it believable before getting into the ship and leaving to return to his home once more.